Well, I also had to get Michael's take on NCIS coming back this season without fan favorite Abby. Pauley Perrette.
Some television shows survive cast changes. NCIS did more than survive. It kept reshaping itself around each departure, and the results ranged from emotionally devastating to quietly dignified to outright chaotic. 10 major actors walked away from one of the most consistently watched crime dramas in television history, and not one of those exits unfolded the same way. One departure left a cast member dealing with nightmares for over a year. Another was requested before anyone had finished filming the second season. One triggered a behind-the-scenes conflict so significant that its effects could still be felt in the show's final years. None of this stayed entirely hidden. Most of the people involved eventually talked, in interviews, on social media, in statements carefully worded enough to protect themselves while saying just enough to make the truth unmistakable. Taken together, these 10 stories paint a picture of what it actually costs to anchor a network drama that airs 22 episodes a year, year after year, until the professional and personal weight of it becomes something a person simply cannot carry anymore. Pauley Perrette played Abby Shuto for 15 seasons, and if you watched NCIS during that stretch, you already know the character was unlike anyone else on the show. The pigtails, the calf-pow cups, the forensic brilliance wrapped inside a gothic personality that somehow made the most disturbing evidence feel approachable. Abby functioned as the emotional engine of the entire series, the character who softened Gibbs and kept the lab from feeling cold. When Perrette announced she was leaving before season 16, the statement itself was careful and brief. What followed were cryptic social media posts describing multiple physical assaults and a working environment that had turned genuinely hostile. Speculation centered on a conflict with Mark Harmon after his dog bit a crew member badly enough to require 15 stitches, and Harmon continued bringing the dog to set even after the injury. As both the lead actor and a producing partner on the series, he carried enough institutional authority that most people stayed quiet. But Perrette did not. She later said she lost her job for speaking up about her safety concerns, and admitted to having recurring nightmares about the situation for more than a year after her final episode aired. Her exit kept Abby alive rather than killed off, written out of the team rather than removed from the world entirely, which left fans just enough emotional room to keep hoping for something more. Jennifer Esposito arrived in season 14 as Special Agent Alexandra Quinn, a sharp and experienced former training officer with the kind of resume that suggested a long run ahead of her. The character was witty, built for slow burn development, and positioned as someone who could hold her own alongside Gibbs without requiring much adjustment time. After one season, Quinn was quietly written out to care for a sick mother, and the exit arrived with almost no ceremony. Esposito addressed the inevitable speculation directly on social media, shutting down health rumors by stating plainly that she was fine. Her actual explanation was more straightforward than most. Quinn had always been written as a limited arc, a one-season character, and not a permanent member of the team. Television, she noted, operates with that kind of built-in inconsistency. Actors come in to serve a storyline, and when that function is complete, the story moves on without them. She spoke warmly about the experience while being clear-eyed about how the business actually works. And in retrospect, Alex Quinn holds the distinction of the shortest major agent run in NCIS history, which makes it easy to forget how much she added to the season she was actually in. Sasha Alexander left before most viewers had any idea she was struggling. As Caitlin Todd in the first 2 seasons, she helped shape the identity of a show still finding its footing. A former Secret Service agent whose instincts and principles gave early NCIS its moral center and its sense of emotional stakes. The season 2 finale answered the question of her departure in the most unforgettable way available, with a sniper's bullet from Ari Hazwari ending Kate's story in a moment that shocked an audience that had never seen the show go that far before. Behind that creative decision was a conversation Alexander had with series creator Donald Bellisario, during which she broke down in tears and told him directly that she could not continue at the pace the production demanded. 24 episodes a season translated to 17-hour shooting days that stretched across most of the calendar year, and reaching the end of that road felt less like a career choice than a matter of personal survival. Belisario acknowledged the situation without bitterness, and what could have been a quiet, behind-the-scenes compromise became instead one of the defining moments in the show's entire run. Lauren Holly signed on in Season 3 for what she expected to be roughly 6 episodes as director Jenny Shepard, a character with authority, intelligence, and romantic history with Gibbs layered enough to give the writers plenty to explore. The limited arc expanded dramatically. By the time her run concluded, she had appeared in nearly 50 episodes and grown from recurring guest into a central figure the show had not anticipated needing. That expansion came with a cost. Holly admitted in interviews that she grew bored with Shepard after about 2 years on the series, finding it difficult to stay genuinely connected to a character whose arc was being developed at the uneven pace that network television tends to demand. When Donald Belisario left the show, she lost the creative relationship that had drawn her to the role in the first place, and the decision to write Shepard out in a Season 5 shootout at a diner made sense for everyone involved. Holly later said she felt relief when it happened, which is the kind of candid admission that tells you more about a working experience than any polished public statement ever could. Michael Weatherly spent 13 seasons building Tony DiNozzo into one of the most recognizable characters in procedural television. The charm, the film references, the drawn-out chemistry with Ziva David, the loyalty that kept revealing itself underneath layers of deliberate deflection. DiNozzo earned his place in the ensemble in ways the pilot episode could never have fully predicted. Weatherly's decision to leave came down to a feeling he described as a circle going all the way around, and the exhaustion of sustaining a character through 24-episode seasons for over a decade played heavily into that. He moved directly from NCIS to the lead role on CBS's legal drama Bull, which gave him room to build something entirely new without DiNozzo's shadow following him into every scene. The farewell the writers gave him matched the weight of what the character had meant to the series. A revelation that he had a daughter with Ziva, long presumed dead, sent him to Paris to raise her, closing the chapter without destroying it. Weatherly has kept the fandom engaged periodically with photographs captioned in ways carefully designed to suggest a possible return, though nothing definitive has materialized since his departure. Dwayne Henry's Clayton Reeves came into the series in Season 13 as an MI6 officer whose intelligence background gave the team a perspective they had not carried before. Showrunner Gary Glassberg created the character specifically to broaden the show's scope, and Reeves had the kind of layered history that could have supported years of further development in the right hands. Glassberg's unexpected death in 2016 changed that calculation entirely. Without the person who had championed the character, the writers struggled to find Reeves a permanent narrative anchor, and the direction for his arc grew increasingly uncertain. The Season 15 finale resolved the question with a decision that was both dramatic and final. Reeves stepped in front of a gunman's bullet to save Abby Shudo, dying heroically in a scene that landed harder because it arrived in the same episode arc that would mark Pauley Perrette's own final appearance. Henry received the news with remarkable grace, describing the exit scene as the best work he had ever filmed, and acknowledging openly that this industry rarely offers guarantees about anything to anyone. Emily Wickersham stepped into what was arguably the most difficult position any NCIS cast member had been placed in, building a new character in the space that Cote de Pablo had left behind, for an audience that was not yet ready to stop grieving the original. Eleanor Bishop arrived in Season 11 as a former NSA analyst turned field agent, analytical and sometimes socially uncertain in ways that genuinely set her apart from her predecessors. 8 seasons later, she had earned her place fully, and most of the viewers who had doubted her in the beginning had quietly come around. Her exit in the Season 18 finale was staged as a manufactured disgrace, a deliberate scandal designed to give her cover for a classified undercover mission, which kept the story structurally open in a way that a clean departure never could have. The real explanation arrived through an Instagram post shortly after the finale, pointing towards something more personal. Wickersham was ready to move on. And in December of 2021, she and actor James Badge Dale welcomed their first child together. The exit gave Bishop a quiet dignity that some of the show's more abrupt departures had not managed to achieve. Mark Harmon carried NCIS for 18 seasons, and the full weight of that number only becomes clear when you consider that Leroy Jethro Gibbs was not simply a character. He was the structural premise of the entire show. The gravelly authority, the famous rules, the grief running underneath every case that Harmon played without ever letting it curdle into self-pity. Gibbs held the series together through roster changes that would have unraveled most dramas entirely. At 70 years old, the physical demands of an action-heavy production were mounting steadily. And beyond the acting, Harmon was simultaneously carrying executive producing responsibilities across NCIS and several of its spin-offs. His departure in season 19 was handled with a restraint that felt intentional rather than accidental. Gibbs chose not to return from Alaska after surviving a near-death explosion, drawn toward a quietness that Washington could no longer provide, and the show let him walk away without a funeral or a final confrontation. Showrunner Stephen Binder noted afterward that audiences should never count Gibbs out entirely, and that single comment has been enough to keep speculation alive in the years since. Maria Bello joined the cast in season 15 as forensic psychologist Jacqueline Sloan, and her arrival shifted the team's dynamic in ways that felt genuinely new rather than cosmetically different. Sloan was not an agent in the traditional field sense. She was someone who understood why crimes happened rather than simply responding to them. And that distinction gave her scenes a texture the show had not quite carried before. The relationship between Sloan and Gibbs developed slowly across 3 seasons. Two people shaped by considerable damage who found something steadier and quieter in each other's company. And Bello described exploring that dynamic as one of the most rewarding parts of her entire time on the series. She had signed a 3-year contract from the very beginning, and when season 18 arrived, renewing it simply was not something she wanted to do. Her exit sent Sloan to Afghanistan following a mission to rescue kidnapped girls, where she chose to remain for humanitarian work rather than return. A send-off that matched who the character had always been, grounded in empathy rather than action. Cote de Pablo's exit before season 11 remains the most discussed departure in the show's long history, and the conversation around it has never fully settled into something everyone agrees on. Ziva David arrived in season 3 to fill the void left by Sasha Alexander, and within a fairly short time, the replacement framing became entirely irrelevant. She was simply one of the strongest characters the series had ever developed. The Mossad background, the trust built painstakingly with Gibbs, and the years of slow-building tension with Tony DiNozzo gave her a hold on the audience that continued long after she left the show. Her departure arrived with almost no warning. Veteran cast member David McCallum described his confusion publicly, saying he could not understand how a worldwide leading character could simply vanish days before production started on a new season. De Pablo offered personal reasons at the time and elaborated 3 years later, explaining that she felt the scripts had stopped treating Ziva with the respect the character had earned, that valuable storylines were disappearing, and that the situation was not fair to who the character had become. The show later declared Ziva dead in an off-screen event, which many fans found deeply unsatisfying. But the story did not end there. She returned for a limited arc, revealed that she had faked her death, and briefly reignited the long-running question about a reunion with Tony DiNozzo that the audience had never stopped wanting. Whether her story has actually concluded is something the show has never made entirely clear, and that deliberate ambiguity may be the most accurate tribute to a character who was never fully predictable from one episode to the next.